Joe Biden, we played this audio for you earlier this week, is poised to introduce new Title IX legislation, which will increase the overall power of transgender athletes. But he's not even willing to say, hey, it's wrong for men to compete against women, which is what Boris Johnson was willing to say. And I want you to listen to this, and then I want you to think about this question. Why has Joe Biden avoided saying what the vast majority of people all over this country agree with? Here's Boris Johnson speaking out today in the UK.
I don't think that biological males should be competing in female sporting events, and you know, maybe that's a controversial thing to say, but it just seems to me to be sensible. And I also happen to think that women should have spaces which are, whether it's in hospitals or prisons or change rooms or wherever, which are dedicated to women. That's as far as my thinking has developed on this issue.
So that is Boris Johnson. And what I would ask everyone out there listening right now is this. Why in the world will Joe Biden not say the same thing? Why will Jen Psaki not even say it on his behalf? We certainly know that 79-year-old Joe Biden is not in favor of men competing against women. There's just no way under the sun that is true. Why won't he say it? Buck, the reason why he won't say it is because he's afraid of alienating his base.
He's also in favor of, according to the White House documents that we discussed just a few days ago, of full transgender surgery and hormone therapy for teenagers. I mean, and kids who are just, adolescents. I mean, 12, 13, 14-year-olds, and perhaps younger. Which is just crazy. I mean, I spoke with an MD friend of mine about this. I said, I'm just wondering, what does the psychiatric community say about that? Not about trans, you always say adults is one thing. If you want to live your life a certain way, you want to make your decisions, that's a separate category. We could discuss how that, manifests and everything else. People can agree or
disagree with that, but at least they're adults.
Well, exactly. But I said, would the psychiatric community says, psychiatrists know that if they speak out about the issue of trans children, the woke mob is going to come for them and destroy them and get them to lose their license and everything else. But they know that there's no long-term science or studies or data to suggest that this is safe. I mean, forget about mentally and emotionally safe, that this is physically safe. The risks of sterility are very high from those kinds of, so you'll never be able to have kids your whole life. And that's just one thing. There are also a whole lot of other areas where it's very likely to have extreme physical impact over one's entire life. I mean, you cannot change. Well, though that growth period, right, when you're going through puberty, male or female, a lot of major changes happen to your body. The Biden White House, I mean, this is what we said in the beginning. They're putting forward this old backslapping, I'm a union guy. And, he just gave this whole speech, Joe Biden, the unions are what delivered this. He pretends to be this old school Democrat, but really he's a facade for the lunatic left, which is why he won't answer the question, as you said, about where does the Biden White House stand on this. This is about federal law. This is about federal policy. This isn't just a theoretical anymore. We're going to talk to Betsy DeVos about what it means for Title IX. They should have a clear opinion they'll articulate. But, Clay, they won't because they know that it's getting too short here between now and the election. And it's not looking good for the maniacal left.
You have to pick a side here. You have to pick a side. You cannot be in the squishy middle on the question of, do biological men who want to identify as women deserve the ability to compete against women? You're either for women's athletics or you're for full transgender domination, frankly, of women's athletics. And I think on some level, Buck, what they're not acknowledging, but is going to become more and more omnipresent as we move forward, is it's going to happen in basketball or tennis or track and field, a sport that lots of people care about, and swimming in the Olympics would be a sport that people care about, but they don't really care about it that much in the NCAA college athletics of swimming. But when a really good male basketball player decides inevitably this is going to happen, when a really good male basketball player decides, hey, you know what? I've always felt like I'm a woman. I identify now as a woman. And you're going to have a 6'9" beast of an athlete, male, who suddenly is playing in the WNBA and is dominating because that athlete would be the greatest women's basketball player of all time. It's going to be impossible to not discuss and acknowledge this situation.
I actually think that it's likely to come to, women's tennis is a sport that really,
lots of people pay attention to.
A lot of people pay attention to women's tennis. I think it's a much bigger draw than the WNBA is overall, globally. And you're going to have a biological male in women's tennis. And keep in mind, the purse for the U.S. Open, same for men as it is for women, and it's like $4 million or $3 million.
They pay them the exact same.
So now you're talking about somebody who you transition. You only have to transition for a couple of years, and you could make theoretically tens of millions of dollars being the best female tennis player in the world instead of being the number 500 male, maybe the number 1,000 male on the tour. I mean, whatever the rankings. I think the rankings stop at 500. But point being, that's the level of difference that we're talking about here. And the left is just going to keep saying yes, because I have to remind people this because people reject this initially, Clay, and then they go, wait, no, you're right. It's not that women can become, or rather that men can become transgender women. The ideology of the left is that a man who is transgender can become a woman. Full stop. No, and in fact, the left will even push this, places like the HuffPost, Salon, I mean, the real crazy commie stuff. They'll push that there's something bigoted. There are articles on this, you can find them, about a heterosexual male who is not attracted to a transgender female because it's a female, you see. It's a female you're dealing with, not a transgender female. That is the actual left. I know people hear this, they say, that's what they believe.
The other thing is they try to play games here because they say, well, transgender doesn't really change the outcome of most sporting events. And that's because they're saying, well, of course, a woman who decides to become a man has absolutely no chance of ever competing at a high level because men are bigger, stronger, and faster than women. So the only time this becomes a competitive issue is when we move from a man deciding to become a woman, right? And so what's also interesting, even from the Biden White House, if you really want to drill down on this, Joe Biden supported congressional investigations into steroid use in baseball because he thought it impacted the overall fairness of the sport. Well, if you believe that men injecting themselves with steroids, which makes them bigger, stronger, and faster, is a direct threat to competition in America, and oh, by the way, the other reason they said, in addition to competitiveness, they said they didn't want kids to take the lesson that they should be injecting themselves with steroids to be good at athletics. Well, what about the kids out there that are taking the lesson of, I'm a mediocre guy at sports, even maybe a decent college athlete at sports, but I could be the greatest women's athlete of all time, and I could make tens of millions of dollars. Somebody's going to take that economic incentive. They're going to grab that brass ring.
But it's also the tip of the spear for the Marxist, family-destroying, gender-eradicating left in so many ways. As a society, as a civilization, we treat men and women differently, and there are some aspects of how men should treat women that I think are actually rooted in decency, morality, and ethics. The notion of, even when I'm sure you're
chivalry is not all awful. It's
correct.
Actually, yes.
It's exactly where I'm going. I mean, you never, and any red-blooded American dad will say, you never hit a girl. A man never lays a hand on a woman. A guy gets a little mouthy at a bar. Your dad says, maybe you gotta, defend yourself, whatever. But with a woman, there's a different approach. We treat women differently, and that's a part of our Western Judeo-Christian civilization in America that is a good thing. I mean, when I'm treating them differently in good ways, that's being eradicated here too. I mean, the sense of male chivalry that you are to defend and honor and cherish women, that's all being eradicated by this. Because to bring it all back to the question, I give Matt Walsh over the Daily Wire credit for it. What is a woman?
Marsha Blackburn asked that at Ketanji Brown Jackson. She couldn't answer it. And by the way, we're talking about sports that are not physically violent. Combat sports is going to get tougher and tougher, Buck. Because if you got a full-grown dude and he decides to become a woman, he's still a lot bigger, stronger, and faster than everybody he's going to be fighting against. That is not going to end well. At some point, you're going to have a biological dude who just beats the crap out of a biological woman, and we're calling it women's sports. And I think that's already starting to happen a little bit in the UFC, but it's going to get worse as the incentive structure continues to be altered and as this becomes more common.